everyone, and welcome to Kid Plus Kid, the YouTube channel that features kids learning from kids. Or at least, a kid, me. I'm your host, Madison, and this is my worthless sidekick, Stevenson. Say hi, Stevenson.
Hi, Stevenson.
Today we'll be talking about the death of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States and the first to be assassinated.
Assassination. To murder someone suddenly, especially someone famous, it's not a good idea.
Abraham Lincoln is probably most famous as the president during the Civil War, which was fought between the Union, the northern states, and the Confederate, the southern states, after the South decided to leave the United States and make their own country. You may have heard that there were a number of reasons as to why the people were fighting the Civil War, including disagreements about slavery, taxes, and states' rights. That's true, and that might be something we discuss in a future episode. But for John Wilkes Booth, the guy who killed Lincoln, yeah, he was pretty much just a bit old racist.
State right, Texas, Texas, state right, Texas.
Oh, well, I just really don't like black people.
State right, Texas.
Not cool, John Wilkes Booth hand. Not cool. Booth's plans to take Lincoln out of the picture originated years before the assassination, while the Civil War was still being fought. He assembled a group of conspirators in 1864 with plans to kidnap Lincoln and exchange him for Confederate prisoners. Booth thought that the move would encourage more people in the North to stand up against the war, which would weaken their position. He also thought that the United States government would have to acknowledge the Confederate government in order to agree to the prisoner exchange.
All right, y'all want your president back? Let's do a little trade.
What was that? Did somebody hear something?
It's me, the Confederate States of America. I know you can hear me.
How silly of me. I'm all alone here. No one else is saying anything.
I know you can hear me. Stop it. Stop ignoring me. I'm right here and you know it.
Must be a mosquito or something.
John Wilkes Booth and his posse made schemes for 2 different kidnapping attempts, but neither one panned out. Before they could try again, the Confederate Army surrendered and the Civil War officially ended. Most of the leaders of the South went into hiding, but Booth still believed in their cause. With the Confederacy in shambles, however, what could he do except let it go? And he might have done just that, except that 2 days after the South surrendered, on April 11th, 1865, Booth attended a speech at the White House in which President Lincoln was talking about his desire to allow former slaves to become full American citizens. That was the last straw. The idea of dark-skinned American citizens made his blood boil, and Booth was no longer interested in settling for kidnapping either.
He's gone too far. I won't stand for it. Lewis, George, David, we need to act. Now.
We could dip some chocolate in some mustard and make him eat it.
We could open his bedroom window while he's sleeping, and he'll get chilly and catch a bad cold.
Why stop there? If we're at his window, we can maybe put a worm on his face. A big, juicy one.
No, gentlemen. The time for mustard chocolate and worm faces is past. We need to take care of Lincoln permanently.
Do you mean we should president nap him again?
Make him take a nap.
Oh, and then as soon as he starts to snore, here comes the worm!
Forget the kidnapping. Lincoln wants to make Negroes American citizens. That bearded buffoon needs to die.
Or the worm idea, maybe.
No way. I'm out of here if you're going to start talking about murder. I never signed on for this, Johnny.
Sit down and shut up, George. You're in too deep now. We're all in too deep. We need to put an end to it.
But the war's over. We lost, John. What's the point?
All that means is we're out of the first act. The final curtain hasn't dropped yet.
Ugh, he's talking in theater metaphors again.
Metaphor. A word or phrase used to paint a word picture by comparing two things that aren't really alike.
Jonathan, you can't possibly be suggesting that we murder the President of the United States simply for revenge.
Can we stop throwing around the M word? My goodness, we were supposed to be president nappers, not killers.
Listen to me, you frothy elf-skin dewberries. If we only killed Lincoln, it might not make that big a difference. You're thinking too small. In one fell swoop, on the very same time, we will eliminate each of the most important leaders of the North, throwing the nation into chaos and giving the South the time required to rise again.
What do you mean, John?
Tonight, in 3 hours' time, George, you will proceed to the Kirkwood House Hotel, where Vice President Andrew Johnson is residing. You will make sure he never leaves alive. David, you will take Lewis to the home of Secretary of State William Seward. Lewis, I've no doubt a bullet between the eyes will ensure he is no trouble for us. After it's done, the two of you will escape together, meeting George and myself in Maryland.
What about you?
Me? David, I am a famous actor. I will be at Ford's Theater, of course, enjoying the hilarious play, Our American Cousin. And do you know, our beloved president will be in attendance as well. Surely, as a fan of the theater, the president would enjoy making my acquaintance. Oh, and did I mention that General Grant will be there as well? At the president's invitation, no less. Which means they will be sitting together in the presidential box. I will make my way to their seats during the play. Now, there is an extremely amusing bit in which Asa, the lead character, oh, this is too great, calls Mrs. Mount Chessington, oh, what is it? A sock-dologizing old man-trap. It's hysterical. The audience roars with laughter without fail. And tonight, while they laugh, I will shoot Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head. I will stab Ulysses Grant in the heart, and I will take the greatest bow of my career, and the South will rise triumphant.
At least that was the plan. However, as you know, if you've ever attempted to assassinate the 16th president of the United States, things don't always go according to plan. Lewis Powell successfully gained access to the Secretary of State's house, but his family got suspicious before he made his way to Seward's room. Powell wounded him, but of course everyone started to freak out. So Powell left the job unfinished and took off where David Harold was supposed to be waiting on the getaway horse. Once everyone started crying bloody murder, however, Harold took off without Powell, leaving his buddy to wander Washington, trying to elude the police and finding a safe place to hide. After 3 days, Powell found his way back to a boarding house owned by Mary Surratt, which was a place Booth and the others used to plot and scheme. It didn't turn out to be a safe place for Powell, though. He showed up just as the police were taking Mary in for questioning, and he just happened to waltz right into custody. You may have remembered that George Atzerodt was given the job of killing Andrew Johnson, the vice president, but he didn't really want anything to do with murder. Booth told him to do it anyway, so he booked a room at the same hotel that the VP was staying at, and that's it. He chickened out and started drinking instead. He made some suspicious drunken comments and ended up being arrested the next day. Now that brings us to Booth. Not only is he a famous actor, but he's come from a long line of famous actors. But, of course, John Wilkes Booth won't go down in history for his Hamlet. Like he predicted, though, he was famous enough to be able to wander around Ford's Theater wherever he wanted. Even though that President Lincoln had been dreaming about dying, some have reported that he seems to have believed he was going to die, he still attended the show that night. The president went to see Our American Cousin with his wife, Mary, but was not accompanied by General Grant, though, like Booth thought he would be. Although Lincoln invited the Grants, they declined because Mary told Lincoln and Julie Grant weren't getting along. So Seward survived the attack. No one even tried to hurt Johnson. Grant didn't show up, but President Abraham Lincoln? That part went how Booth intended. He went to the presidential box with a gun and a knife. The box was supposed to be guarded, but the police officer assigned to the job had popped over for a drink at a nearby tavern instead of protecting the president. Booth waited for the big laugh he knew was coming and shot the president in the back of the head while he was laughing. Eyewitness accounts disagree about what exactly happened next. Booth has often been credited as shouting the Virginian state motto, a Latin phrase that means "death always to tyrants." Some say that they heard him shout something about revenging the South or freeing it. Regardless, Booth escapes, breaking his leg at some point in the process. And remember David Harold, who's supposed to be in charge of the getaway horse at the Secretary's house, but who took off early? He met up with Brooke in Maryland. They managed to hide out for nearly 2 weeks, but eventually the farm they hid was found, and Union soldiers surrounded them on April 26th. Harold surrendered, but Booth refused to be taken alive. The soldiers set fire to the barn, and Booth was shot by one of the soldiers and died. Harold, Powell, and Atzerodt were all executed by hanging less than 3 months later. President Lincoln was taken to a house across the street after being shot. A handful of doctors, including the Army General Surgeon, did their best to treat them, but there was nothing they could do. Abraham Lincoln died the morning after he was shot. Lincoln's assassination was a huge moment in American history. He was the first president to be assassinated, but he wouldn't be the last. A total of 4 presidents have been murdered: Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy. Every time it has been a major, heartbreaking event that has affected our entire nation. As far as details go, well, that's a question for another episode. Booth may have been successful in killing President Lincoln, but none of his bigger goals were achieved. The United States has stayed together, and many know Lincoln as the man who saved the nation. It would take far too long for Black Americans to gain all rights afforded to the whites, and racism still, sadly, is not extinct. But great progress has been made. What would John Wilkes Booth think of President Barack Obama? If you ask me, if a wretched old bigot like Booth would be freaking out, we gotta be doing something right. To sum it up, Lincoln, assassinated. John Wilkes Booth, racist. Plan 12.44% successful. Mostly failure. April 14th, 1865. And that's our show. Thanks for coming by to Kid Plus Kid. Show your support by liking, sharing, subscribing, and sending money. Let us know in the comments what you want to learn about next. Say bye, Stevenson. Bye, Stevenson. See ya.